Hi there, and welcome to Gunvote, a Canadian gun owner's daily guide to our 44th federal election. My name is Daniel Fritter, the owner of Calibre magazine, and I've been covering gun politics and policy professionally in Canada for nearly a decade, with Calibre's 10-year anniversary just next year. I've had the honor of testifying before our Senate on gun laws, I've done hundreds of media interviews on the subject, and I've broken numerous legislative and regulatory changes within our community in those previous years. I've also made some great friends along the way, and since the notion of talking to myself for 20 or 30 minutes every day for your entertainment sounds terrifying, I've decided to invite some of those friends in this podcast. Friends like Phil Chau. Phil?
Hi, I'm Phil. I'm the owner of Canadian Tactical Cowboy Supplies and longtime political volunteer. I started CTC Supplies because I love firearms. I love shooting in general, 3-gun, IPSC, precision, collecting interesting guns. I also hunt. And I love politics because I want to keep those guns. So I've also held almost every possible position on the local campaigns, from door knocker to cold caller to data analyst, strategist, campaign manager, chairperson, and riding president. So politics and guns are unfortunately totally tied together, and so I'm here on this podcast to help you walk you through what's going to happen over the next 20 days.
As much fun as talking about the ins and outs of door knocking probably is, maybe we'll just jump right into the numbers for today. So, obviously 20 days out from the election, update for today, numbers have largely stabilized, sort of around a bit of a surprising threshold. I think we both agree. As of today, for consistency's sake, we've been leaning heavily on the Main Street election barometer feature with Calibre because it's a great function. Many thanks to both Main Street for the polling on that and iPolitics for sponsoring it. It's awesome. Showing about 70% for the Conservative Party with an 80% chance of a Conservative majority, which feels like I'm announcing the weather when I say that, but that's what the polls say. Interestingly, when you break down the regionals too, it's really surprising. They're dead flat across the prairies. There's no movement really in the prairies in Alberta in any large numbers. But they're showing a 4-seat increase for the Conservative Party in Ontario, or in BC, and I think a 19-seat increase in Ontario. Those are big gains in Ontario, and 4 in BC. That doesn't sound like a big number, but the way the ridings break out in BC, that would be tremendous. And then 3 more seats in Quebec, whereas a lot of the other parties on Main Street's polling are showing kind of just pretty dead flat across the margin. But as Phil and I have discussed over the weekend, because we chat as friends, Phil kind of coined this, perhaps, the danger zone. And if you're wondering if that's a reference to Top Gun or Archer, the answer to that is yes, because who doesn't like both? So, Phil, why do you say this is the danger zone?
Well, let's talk about what's at stake here, right? As gun owners, right? Really, to say that the future of sports shooting in Canada is at risk is not an understatement, right? Service rifle is effectively dead. It's been dead for almost over a year now, right? 3-gun just isn't as fun, and every magazine-fed semi-automatic centerfire rifle is on the chopping block. And the two parties who have a reasonable chance of having influence on government will probably be going after your handguns next, all right? So there's really only one party that actually has that will be saving your firearms here, right?
And I'll interject here too, because it's not just sports shooting. I mean, we do have those guns on the chopping block, and you're not wrong. Every single one of those sports will die. But as I brought up in the past too, as a gun club president, those sports drive a large proportion of our membership, as does handguns. I'm sure as a store owner as well, you could speak to the fact that AR-15s and 3-gun is a massive market. If those numbers dry up, I don't think it's just sports shooting that goes. I think you'll see your local gun club either shrink or be completely eaten by noise complaints from your local municipality, from real estate developers trying to take a hold there. So this is much more. I think this is our community at large. Like, if you enjoy having a gun club near your house, if you enjoy having gun shops you like shopping at, these are the things that we stand to lose now if this election goes the other way. So sorry, but that was, just to clarify for folks to understand that the stakes here is not just, if you don't own an AR-15, you don't own a handgun, you just shoot a Winchester 308 at a deer once a year. The guy that sells you the ammo, he cares about this, so even if it doesn't impact you, it impacts the people that help you and support you in your hobby. So I think there's no gun owner listening to this that can afford to be unengaged this election. So
Exactly.
yeah, I will not. I'll try and not interrupt.
And what I said before, right? I mean, politics and gun ownership are tied together, whether we like it or not, right? And and to bring it back to this week, right? Conservatives and Aaron O'Toole had a really great week, right? They had an incredible week. I think what the swing from the polls is probably, it looks like it's plus 10 or above, right? So, Aaron went from a possible third place finish, right? Conservatives went from a possible third place finish to now having a good chance of forming government. But, and that's the key point, is that we can't, gun owners can't get overconfident about this. Right? The media has definitely jumped in to provide cover for the Liberals, I would say, and it has been, if you've been paying attention to the Twitter sphere and to regular mainstream media, that is incredibly evident. The pundits and everything. It's in the Liberals' interest to play the victim here, right? It's in Justin Trudeau. It's in Justin Trudeau's interest to basically to say, oh, poor me, woe is me, right? In Canada, everyone loves the underdog, right? We love an underdog story here, and Canadians just love it, right? And it really and the underdog story does two things, right? It activates your supporters, right? So that they'll go out and they'll help your local campaign, right? So it's like, well, I thought that they were going to win, so they don't need my help anymore. But now, if you're the underdog, it's like, oh shit, it's time to get going, right? Let's go out and go knock some doors. Let's go wave some signs, let's go donate, right? It scares the Jesus out of casual, left-wing supporters here, right? Because
anytime the Liberal Party is below 30%, that there's just faces melting somewhere in Ontario, just flat off of their skull with fear, because
Absolutely.
that's an unnatural number for that party to be at.
Exactly, right? I mean, people wake up and start paying attention, right? I mean, look, it's not even Labor Day yet, right? There are literally three more weeks to go in this election. Election day is September 20th. Lots of people are still completely checked out, right? There's a chance, people are listening to CBC now. There's a chance of a conservative majority. Oh my God, right? We need to start paying attention.
And I think gun owners especially need to, well, not gun owners especially, but as a population is going to be largely, perhaps even most heavily impacted by this government continuing to serve. People watch the polls, and I get the sense a lot of people, they watch it and they think everyone else is watching it the same way they are, when they forget there are people watching this and then taking action. And when you start seeing these results, especially the regional results, like those Ontario results, I'd love to see the breakdowns to see how many of those 19 seats are in the 905, like urban GTA type seats. Mm-hmm. Because depending on where those break out, you're going to see, this is where you start to wonder, like, well, where did the $300,000 from Airbnb to the Doctors for Protection from Guns go? Because I can guarantee you that money did not go to advancing anti-gun laws in Canada. When you look at how the donations went, that donation likely went to another organization that's probably helping with this election, because Airbnb wants to secure part-time rentals long-term. That's how that money works. That's how politics works in the modern age. Mm-hmm. And I think that they forget, if you're listening to this and you're just kind of sitting on the sidelines and you're going, oh, we got it in the bag. Like, look at the unexpected thing. This is going to be, those pollsters, they got this completely right. Like, everyone likes to point out every time a pollster's wrong. So, like, they could just be wrong. Like, the Leger polls have the Liberals and the Conservatives basically at 32 and 33. So, mm-hmm. Even amongst the pollsters, you get different results. But, you're going to start to see the pushback now. You're going to start to see Lead Now, Press Progress, other groups that they're going to start getting funding all of a sudden, because they're going to see this as an opportunity. They're going to go, you better believe they're working on literature right now. There are graphic designers putting together literature that will land on doorsteps at some point in the next week saying, donate today to help stop the Conservative Party from winning. Because now they can frame it that way. They can say, you need to stop. Remember, stop Harper. It's so much easier to say stop something than the alternative that says get something going. So I think it's, we got to be careful that, like you said, these polls are going to create reactions, and they're, things will start to shift.
Exactly. And let's think about national polls, right? National polls simply show a trend, right? You know, we have seen a week of trends where the Liberal support has slipped, right? But that doesn't necessarily translate into seats, right? And the national picture is different from a regional picture. A regional picture is much more useful here, right? A national picture makes great news story, right? It makes, you know, a great lead in for the CBC, the National Post, you know, the Globe and Mail, but it doesn't accurately reflect what the regional issues here are at play, right? Leger has everyone pretty flat, right? Nanos still has Trudeau as a preferred prime minister. The Liberals are still leading in Quebec, primarily because of a falling bloc, right? I mean, the Conservatives are making slight gains there, but not too much.
And it's very difficult for the Conservatives to make gains there. And on Thursday we have the French language debate as well, so that'll be hugely crucial.
Exactly.
In how this all unfolds.
And good point, right? I mean, the debates, you know, the Conservatives have pulled even here, right? I mean, they've maybe taken a slight lead, but it's within the margin of error. The debates, it's safe to say the debates will probably make or break this election, right?
Yeah. No, I mean, I say yes. Now, maybe for the folks at home, why do we both say yes to that? Why do we think the debates will be so crucial in this election?
So when we have an election, people go to the election to go to the ballot box and they ask a question, and the ballot box question, and they call that the ballot box question, right? The ballot box question is whether in 2015 was whether Stephen Harper deserved another term of government, and the voters said no, right? In 2019 was you know, did Andrew Scheer, you know, with his issues during the election, did he deserve to form government? And the voters said no, right? What is the ballot box question here in 2021, right? I think the ballot box question will is does Justin Trudeau deserve another shot at government? But I don't. But you know, that could change, right? That could change quickly, right? That could change to are the Conservatives scary boogeymen? That could be the question, right? And that's a question that Conservatives will lose, you know, 9 out of 10 times, right?
Although now I agree that 9 times out of 10, especially because you have to remember too, if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably already more politically engaged than like 94% of Canadians. Most Canadians confuse the federal Conservative Party with provincial Conservative parties. They think that Doug Ford and Aaron O'Toole work with the same teams, same people. They think that Christy Clark was in the same party as Justin Trudeau. Like people don't pay a lot of attention. But you know, with that, I listened to a podcast, David Hurley's podcast, and he mentioned in his focus groups, for those that don't know, he's a political pollster and pundit that hosts various podcasts on the political landscape in Canada. And he's actually hosting focus groups throughout this election, asking questions and publicly posting those. And it seems like he's referenced quite repeatedly that Aaron O'Toole is doing a fantastic job of softening the edges of the Conservative image. And I mean, I'll say that's been a surprise to me. And I'll get into that in a little bit, but he's been very effective at making sure that we can't get painted in that same light. And he's actually seen a pretty strong result in his focus groups that people don't think the sky will fall if the Conservatives win, which is change. I mean, as a volunteer in the 2015 election, this gets into something else I was hoping we'd talk about today is, you know, things that will change is you'll start to see some of the coverage and some of the attitudes change. And we've already seen that with the coverage of the protests, because in 2015, we had huge protests. We had a guy charge the stage while Harper was speaking. And the coverage was largely couched in the language of people speaking out against government and whatnot. Now we see the same protests where people are being very vocal and very angry, and in various cases, aggressive, rude, and offensive, absolutely, towards the candidates that are campaigning in certain ridings. But the coverage is very different, and that's where you start to see. You know, I don't know if that coverage would look the same if the Conservatives weren't polling the way they are. You know, I think that references back to your underdog story of when you're the underdog, you have a bit of social license, you have a little bit of wiggle room that you don't get once you're the favorite. and you got to wonder, in the coming weeks, if that sort of stuff continues, it's not going to take many more of those protests being covered really negatively before we start seeing the comparisons between Aaron O'Toole and Donald Trump, the Proud Boys, the far right, all that kind of stuff. And I think, I can speak for everyone that I don't think we don't want to have that level of debauchery and violence brought into our political discourse. So it's very interesting to see sort of where we're at now and think of what the next 2 weeks might actually bring. It's going to be interesting. What do you think? What are you looking at? Like, what are you kind of looking for indicators here in the next sort of week? What do you, what's the undercurrent thing that you're going to kind of be looking for from a party to do or say that'll give you the confidence that they might be reading the situation correctly?
Well, I mean, what are we seeing? I mean, a lot of the last previous week has been unforced errors, right, by the Liberals, which Aaron O'Toole and the Conservatives have benefited from. What are we looking? Are we looking to see if there's going to be more unforced errors? I'd be surprised to see if. I think that the Liberals are going to be running a much more disciplined campaign now, right? Let's see what happens with the anti-vax protesters, right? The vocal pride protesters. Will they get more violent, or will they tone it down? What are the Conservatives going to do, right? I remember, I think I saw a recent story about people talking about Uncle Aaron, right? I think the Conservatives benefit from having a kinder, gentler face to them. If we look at the polling, right? If we break out the demographic polling, where do I think men approve of Aaron O'Toole above his approval ratings over men for men are like over 40%. Women are still in the 20s, but that's softening, right? I think people the women demographics are starting to,
and young people are also kind of breaking into these polls as sort of a large group of CPC support that's pretty unexpected, especially given O'Toole's. I mean, he's Uncle O'Toole. I mean, I like the dog policy because everyone knows I love dogs, but he's been kind of coming out as this nerdy policy guy with a massive policy booklet, and to be totally frank, all the right answers as far as I'm concerned that have been very concise but also very comprehensive. I hate to say it because I absolutely loathe the term. He sounds prime ministerial. Mm-hmm. I say I loathe it because I don't know what a prime minister sounds like. I mean, I'll be honest, I kind of like it when a prime minister says, just watch me. I hate that prime minister saying that, but I don't mind a little bit of boldness in politics. So he seems very bold. He seems very measured, and it's surprising to me that that's getting a result amongst the young people. And again, that could be, that could be some of this mercurial polling going on that we might see flip-flop if something happens. I mean, that voting bloc especially is so changeable.
Exactly. Well, I mean, if you are a under 40-year-old, married or unmarried young family, what resonates to you, right? I mean, for our listeners, it's gun issues that resonate, but at the same time, what are the key issues, right? I think housing is an important issue. I think climate change is a really important issue. I think the Conservatives have a pretty good housing platform. I think an environmental platform is not bad, right? I think it definitely could be better. So I think if anything, the Conservatives need to start making moves, start, really actually pressing home on those key issues to start bringing in that sub 40-year-old voter base. And then, what did the Liberals and what did the NDP do, right? How do they bring back their voters, right? If this is a referendum about Justin Trudeau, Justin Trudeau as a steady hand, I think people need to look at themselves and say, have I been better off over the last 6 years? And maybe Jagmeet Singh has a better message for on housing, on the environment. Who knows, right?
Yeah, and that's where I kind of wonder, I've heard a lot discussed about the lack of a ballot question, the lack of a narrative from the Liberal Party in this election, because they don't seem to. I mean, 2015 was all about the change. It was the change. It was going to change everything. You know, it was getting out from underneath the lecherous talons of Stephen Harper in 2015. 2019, it was mostly just about defeating the social conservatives represented by Andrew Scheer. That was that whole election was about that.
The scary boogeyman,
This
right?
election, yeah. And in this election, I do feel like the biggest issue with the Liberals is I don't know what ballot box questions available to them after 6 years incorporating a majority. Because, I mean, everyone remembers that they were handed a massive mandate. The majority was huge in 2015. And now it seems, I don't think, and this is where it comes back around to gun owners, is as gun owners listening to this, you know, we've all been subjected to probably some of the larger hypocrisies of this government. We've talked at length, or I have, about why gun politics are so crucial in the election when we've discussed things like single issue voters, because very few policy matters have as much freedom of movement as firearms. Like even massive things like healthcare and pharmacare and housing policies, the government can only do, they can kind of only make 2% adjustments either way to try and sway market forces in a lot of these cases. Whereas in firearms, they both have the legislative ability and the social license to make massive sweeping changes, as we saw last year in May. So I think it's very important that, you know, we brought this up before and said this is why it's so crucial that gun owners, because we are kind of the canary in the coal mine. And in that role now, we almost have a retrospective on what the Liberals are doing now when they're trotting out these promises of like, well, we're going to build $1.5 million home, or 1.5 million homes, or whatever it was, 1.2 million homes, whatever it was. Just like he's going to plant 4 billion trees or whatever that was. Just like taking our guns away was going to make us safer. And why I say gun owners have a pretty good retrospective is because we've been directly impacted. Like a lot of people forget about the however billion tree promise. They forget about the millions of dollars pledged to Africa for aid. They forget about the WE scandal, the Aga Khan, the SNC Lavalin, the Grope Gate, you know, the elbow and the boob back in the day. There's been so many things that people have forgotten about with him because they don't directly affect them. Like Trudeau, just to be totally crass about it, Trudeau didn't grope any of us. So we don't think about it very often, right? It just doesn't cross our mind. But I own a gun, I can't shoot now. Just like hundreds of thousands of other Canadians do. So but at the same time as we've been affected by it, we've also seen the same headlines we've been seeing for the last freaking 6 years of increased violence, increased drug overdoses, increased crime. And we've seen them continuously put us up on that cross and say, look, it's their fault. We keep cracking down on them and we'll stop all these shootings. We promise. And I think that's where it's, I mean, for me personally, watching a lot of this coverage has been a little bit tough because you hear these things and these things get bandied about and you don't hear follow-up questions, or you don't hear for asking for clarification or connecting dots that are kind of like, okay, well, you're going to build 1.5 million homes. How, where, why? What does that?
Yeah,
what's the point? Are they going to be rental?
That, right?
Are they going to cost $2 million a piece? Are they going to cost $300,000 a piece? Are they going to be in Grand Forks? Or are they going to be in Edmonton? Or are they going to be in Vancouver? Like it's just, but they let them get away with it. And that's where I think, you know, that's what we're hoping this podcast will come around to. Because I think gun owners do have a unique perspective on this stuff. And also too, I think gun owners really can do better to be informed, because this election, as you said, it's so crucial that we deny this governor. We can't afford this government again. So we have to do absolutely as much as we can to try and keep them from getting out. So what would you say, like if where we're at now, we're polling pretty well, but we're in the quote unquote danger zone where we might see that start to flip. And if we lose momentum now, you know, the reality is it's kind of like the halfway point in a football game. You can afford to lose the first half. You can't afford to lose the second half too.
Right. And so, we're Canadian here. Let's use the hockey analogy. Right?
Okay. So yeah, that's great. So we're 3 weeks.
The most dangerous lead in the hockey is a 2-0 lead, right? So
yeah, and that's where we're at. We have, and it's, you know, probably what is it? Maybe end of the first period. Well, yeah, probably thereabouts.
Exactly. End of the first period, and we're at a the Conservatives are a 2-0 lead, right? Where does that lead us? All right.
We're also the Maple Leafs.
Oh, yeah, exactly, right.
So that's
Conservatives are the Maple Leafs, right? So
or maybe the Canucks, or any other Canadian hockey team, pretty much. So what would you say people should do? Like if Gunners listen to this, you know, what would be your tip for today of, you know, here's where we're at, here's what's happened, and here's what you should take home on Monday, August 31st?
More shit posting. I'm kidding.
Oh, God. He's kidding.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding. What
Please
changes
don't say that you stopped the video there.
What changes elections? Facebook memes do not change elections. Owning the libs does not change elections. Shitposting does not change elections. Absolutely fucking not. What changes elections? It's what's called the ground game, right? A local candidate has the ability to realistically change the election only about anywhere from 5 to about 10%, right? If you live in a slam dunk riding where the candidate wins 74% of the electorate or 65% of the electorate and the other guy's like in the 20s, right? I understand, right? Going out to vote is kind of useless there, right? But what can you do as a gun owner, right? The easiest thing that you can do is to donate to the closest competitive, close race that you have, right?
Now, that might not be a conservative, right? You might live in a riding where the next closest to defeat a liberal would be an NDP or a bloc, perhaps.
Possibly.
So you'd say that this gets into the strategic voting issue. So you'd say, yes, donate, support the next guy to unseat the liberal. Now, perhaps just for those that may not know, why? What's strategic voting accomplish?
Well, let's look at the possible numbers here, right? I mean, what's happened over the last 2 years, right? A liberal minority government has been able to push through your Orderson Council, they've been promising a gun ban. They've only needed one extra party to be able to go push through whatever legislation that they wanted. We want to get them to a point where at the worst case scenario, a liberal government requires, 2, 3, even 4 parties to be able to pass legislation, right? Or if you want that OIC gone, right? The Conservatives need to form government, no matter what, right? They can't cancel the OIC being in opposition, right?
No, they need to hold the Prime Minister's office because it needs to hold the Privy Council because the Privy Council is the one way to get rid of the OIC. But of course, that gets into the for perhaps tomorrow's episode, we can get into the OIC and what our possibilities are with that regard, because there are some hiccups there since it is currently before the courts,
exactly,
which will obviously impact what is possible as things come up. But so strategic voting, though, more to the point, is the practice of effectively voting strategically instead of tactically. So instead of voting how you feel about your specific candidate in this individual area, you take a broader view and you go, well, the NDP is unlikely to form government given they're polling at about 20%. So if you toss a vote to them and you help your local NDP candidate win the riding, it doesn't cost the Conservatives because that seat may not have ever been available to them. And I'm thinking about ridings like, South Okanagan is a bad one because that one went NDP Conservative, Nanaimo or something like that, or Port Coquitlam. Is it Coquitlam or Port Coquitlam that has the NDP Liberal split?
I don't think either of them actually. So
Nanaimo is usually one that way, though. Like the CPC is not going to win Nanaimo in ever. But it can be in past times, it's even been kind of close to the Greens out there. So gun owners that might live in Nanaimo or the Nanaimo Fishing Game Club could take it upon themselves to start tracking their local polls and saying, like, if on September 20th you're a gun owner in Nanaimo and the Liberals are polling at, say, 40% and the NDP is polling at 38%, if you got 2,000 members at the Nanaimo Fishing Game Club, get all 2,000 of them to go vote NDP. Because guess what? You'll have an NDP guy, which, you'd probably say, hey, if we had a Conservative guy, he'd be pro-gun, this NDP guy's anti-gun. But you know what? It's an anti-gun representative of a party that you've effectively denied government to. So we can still have Aaron O'Toole rescinding the OIC. And to be honest, part of me wonders if, we've wanted for years for this debate to be going nonpartisan. We bounce the ball back and forth between Liberals and Conservatives because they're the only ones that form government, and strategic voting is a relatively new thing, only made possible by modern communication techniques. Maybe this is our opportunity. So, I love that idea. What else can gun owners do?
Well, we've been locked up in COVID for the last, for the last 18 months. What's better to actually, what's even better is actually the manpower, right? Volunteering for a campaign, right? You can make phone calls if you live in Atlantic Canada, you can make phone calls in British Columbia into a close riding and identify those supporters, right? With Zoom and Teams, whatnot, right? From the comfort of your own home, right? And say, I want to volunteer for, let's say, what's a close riding in Lake Okanagan?
Well, South Okanagan. We saw go NDP with Richard Cannings, who's not a bad guy, to be honest. Nice enough fellow.
Yep.
Birdwatcher, good MP, to be honest. He represents his constituents relatively well, but there's also a very competitive CPC MP down there that would represent a great opportunity for the CPC to pick up one of those 4 BC ridings.
Exactly. So if you live in Red Deer, where your Conservative candidate wins at 75%, right, make calls for your British Columbia Okanagan Conservative candidate, right, to help him identify the votes and to get out the vote to win, right? It's easy.
So I'll explain here, because for those that haven't volunteered with the party before, what Phil's referring to is this ground game, or GOTV, which you probably heard referenced. What it is you'll call, let's say that you're in Red Deer, and you're calling in Penticton, because let's use the same analogy. You're calling Penticton, South Okanagan, to try and help the Conservative candidate down there. What you'll be doing is calling either swing or unidentified voters from a sheet and saying, hi, I'm calling from the Conservative Party. I was just wondering if such and such candidate can count on your help on September 20th. And they may or may not get into a discussion with you. You'll be given talking points. So you don't need to really, you don't have to be worried about anything. You can just show up. If you got 2 feet in a heartbeat, man, you can do the job. And then what will happen is if they say, yes, I'm considering supporting that candidate, that name will then go on to another sheet that the local EDA will try and knock on that person's door to make face-to-face contact, say, hi, I'm such and such from your local representative riding association here from the Conservative Party, representing your candidate, or perhaps the candidate themselves will be there and saying, I'm here to get your vote. What do we do? And that's where that ground game that Phil referenced earlier can get 5 to 10% more, or 3 to 5, depending where you live, because you get out there, and then on election day, what ends up happening is those sheets go out to runners that effectively, as the day goes on, on election day, the parties all get sheets from Elections Canada that says who's voted. It doesn't say how they voted, but it says who's voted in a given polling station. Because we have identified voters that we know said they'll vote Conservative, if we have Joe Smith tells us on April 4th he's going to vote Conservative, and on September 20th at 4 p.m. he hasn't voted, well, guess what? We're knocking on his door and saying, do you need a ride? What do you need to get to vote? And that's why it's called the Get Out the Vote. So it takes a massive amount of people. It's where the Liberals have been really effective, and it's really helped them get very efficient with their votes, which I know Phil's referenced before on some other things, media interviews and stuff that I've heard, and various places of they get votes. They just get enough votes they need to win ridings. The Conservatives tend to win ridings by landslides, like you look at Alberta. And they get that efficiency by having really strong EDA support that lets them reach out to known cores of support that they can rely on when they need them. So it's hugely important that people do this. This isn't like you're calling for donations and you're not going to be helpful. No, if you started calling today and you took this seriously, did it a couple times a week for a couple hours, you would realistically probably amount individually to at least a couple hundred votes on election day if you were to hit it hard.
And remember, there were a number of ridings in British Columbia, in Canada, which were won by under 300 votes. 300 votes, right? How many phone calls could a person make in 2 hours, right? You could probably make 10, 20, connections with voters within that riding, right? And if you do that over 5, 6, 10 days, 20 days still left of the election, how many voters could you realistically reach, identify, and then have that local campaign team drive out to vote, right? And
then think about how many more people's minds might be changed by that than by just shit posting memes on Facebook.
Exactly. Right.
So, I think on that point, we'll probably leave it. So if we'll see you guys tomorrow. I'm not leaving the entire discussion off there, but for now, we've all got to get back to work. So that's officially the first episode of Gunvote in the bag. Many thanks to Phil for co-hosting this episode. I'll be hosting discussions with Phil and a few others. Obviously, Phil has a day job that is not sitting in front of a camera and or reading about gun stuff all day. So we'll have some other folks on as needed. And I'm actually recording some additional regular podcasts for Calibre that are completely unrelated to the politics side, just some interviews with industry folks and colleagues to try and provide some insight into what it's like to work in the gun industry, because I got to say, in the last 10 years, it's been tremendously eye-opening into what goes on. It's not exactly what you might think. So I'm going to try and give you guys some insight into that by talking to some of my friends from the industry. Other than that, please subscribe, like, comment, click bells, whatever you need to do to get these things going where you get them in your inbox, because I think it's going to be really important that we do everything we can to prevent Justin Trudeau from affording the opportunity to form a third government, because as a country, we definitely can't afford another Trudeau government. And if you want to support what we're doing, well, we don't take donations or anything. I don't feel this either. But head on over to the shop, Canadian Tactical Cowboy Supplies, CTCS. Take a look at their fine wares for all your sport shooting needs. Consider buying some stuff, because he's going to be joining me pretty regularly. On my end, head on over to calibremag.ca/subscribe. Buy a magazine subscription. That's the only thing I can say. I'm always happy to get folks on that magazine subscription, and we'll get 6 issues of the magazine out of the mail. And I would appreciate the support for the podcast and stuff. So have a great Monday. Remember, as of today, there remains only 20 days left. And have you done something to help us change our government today? Have a great day, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Adios.